Herbert was the only child the Lord had vouchsafed to Samuel Sunbury and Beatrice Sunbury. He was a pretty baby and then a good-looking child. Mrs. Sunbury brought him up carefully. She taught him to sit up at table and not put his elbows on it. She taught him how to use his knife and fork like a little gentleman. She taught him to stretch out his little finger when he took his teacup to drink out of it, and when he asked why, she said, "Never you mind, that's how it's done. It shows you know what's what." Herbert grew old enough to go to school. Mrs. Sunbury was anxious because she had never let him play with the children in the street. "Evil communications corrupt good manners," she said. "I always have kept myself to myself, and I always shall keep myself to myself." Although they had lived in the same house ever since they were married, she had taken care to keep her neighbors at a distance. She didn't like the idea of Herbert being thrown into contact with a lot of rough boys at the county council school, and she said to him, "Now, Herbert, do what I do. Keep yourself to yourself and don't have anything more to do with them than you can help." But Herbert got on very well at school. He was a good worker and far from stupid. His reports were excellent. It turned out that he had a good head for figures. "If that's a fact," said Samuel Sunbury, "he'd better be an accountant. There is always a good job waiting for a good accountant." So it was settled there and then that this what Herbert was to be. There was a large common near where they lived, and on Saturday afternoons, when it was fine, Mrs. Sunbury took her husband and son for a walk there. She said it was good for Samuel to get a breath of fresh air after being cooped up in a stuffy office all the week. There were always a lot of people on the common. But Mrs. Sunbury, who liked to keep herself to herself, kept out of their way as much as possible. "Look at them kites, Mom," said Herbert suddenly one day. There was a fresh breeze blowing, and a number of kites, small and large, were sailing through the air. "Those, Herbert, not them," said Mrs. Sunbury. "Would you like to go and see where they start, Herbert?" asked his father. "Oh, yes, Dad." There was a slight elevation in the middle of the common, and as they approached it, they saw boys and girls and some men racing down it to give their kites a start and catch the wind. Sometimes they didn't and fell to the ground, but when they did, they would rise, and as the owner unraveled his string, go higher and higher. Herbert looked with ravishment. "Mom, can I have a kite?" he cried. He had already learned that when he wanted anything, it was better to ask his mom first. "Whatever for?" she said. "To fly, Mom. If you're so sharp, you'll cut yourself," she said. Mr. and Mrs. Sunbury exchanged a smile over the little boy's head. Fancy him wanting a kite. Growing quite a little man he was. "If you're a good boy and wash your teeth regular every morning without me telling you, I shouldn't be surprised if Santa Claus didn't bring you a kite on Christmas Day." Christmas was not far off, and Santa Claus brought Herbert his first kite. the beginning he wasn't very clever at managing it, and Mr. Sunbury had to run down the hill himself and start it for him. It was a very small kite, but when Herbert saw it swim through the air and felt that little tug it gave his hand, he was thrilled. It became a passion with Herbert, and as he grew older and bigger, his mother bought him larger and larger kites. He grew very clever at gauging the winds and could do things with his kite you wouldn't have thought possible. Sometimes Herbert, a big boy of 16 now, would challenge another kite flyer. Then he would maneuver his kite to windward of the other fellows, allow his cord to drift against his, and by a sudden jerk, bring the enemy kite down. Saturday afternoon became the great day of the week for them, and when Mr. Sunbury and Herbert left the house in the morning to catch their train to the city, the first thing they did was to look up at the sky to see if it was flying weather. They liked best of all a gusty day with uncertain winds, for that gave them the best chance to exercise their skill. Herbert grew into a 22-year-old gentleman. He married a woman named Biddy and moved out of his parents' house. Biddy hated Herbert's habit of flying kites with his parents. "Be your age," she told him. So on every Saturday, he sneaks out to see his parents flying their kite at the common. The Sunburys had a surprise for him. They weren't flying the big kite which he is used to, but a new one, a box kite, a small one, on the model for which he had made the designs himself when he was younger. He saw it was creating a lot of interest among the other kite flyers. They were standing round it, and Mrs. Sunbury was talking volubly. The first time Samuel ran down the hill with it, the thing didn't rise, but flopped miserably on the ground, and Herbert clenched his hands and ground his teeth. He couldn't bear to see it fail. Mr. Sunbury climbed up the little hill again, and the second time the box kite took the air, there was a cheer among the bystanders. After a while, Mr. Sunbury pulled it down and walked back with it to the hill. Mrs. Sunbury went up to her son. "Like to have a try, Herbert?" He caught his breath. "Yes, Mom, I should." Then Mr. Sunbury joined them. "Samuel, Herbert wants to try the kite." Mr. Sunbury handed it to him, a pleased smile on his face, and Herbert gave his mother his hat to hold. Then he raced down the hill. The kite took the air beautifully, and as he watched it rise, his heart was filled with exultation. It was grand to see that little thing soaring so sweetly.